All right, as I take a look, it says warm up, solve each polynomial. Now we've learned two ways. We could factor, right? So we could factor. We could factor, or you can use the square root method. Square root method is perfect for this one because there is no middle term. So how do I move this negative 27 over, y'all? Gail, add it over. Yes, sir. That way this guy cancels. I get 3x squared equals 27. Well, I still want to get this x squared by himself, right? So how do I move this 3 over there? Damien. Yes, sir. Divide by 3. And we get x squared equals 9. And then we have to undo that squaring. How do you undo something squared? What are you going to do? Ivan? How do I get rid of that little 2, that little square? That thing, square root it? Yes, sir. And a lot of you guys said the answer was 3. Well, Mr. Gotsch always says, what? Don't forget the plus or minus. So you should get plus or minus 3 there. Let me zoom in just a touch more so you can see that. So final answer I got is plus or minus 3. Okay. Again, this is a quadratic. We said that's a parabola. Usually there's going to be 2 answers. Sometimes there's only one. Sometimes there's none. Okay. All right. Any questions with number 1? Some of you guys did factoring, and maybe you took out a 3, and then you factored the x squared minus 9 to x plus 3x minus 3. You should get the same answer. Number 2, can you use the square root method? You cannot. Why not? Why can't you? Gail. There's a middle term. Very good. So we got to factor, right? Teach me how to factor. Teach me how to factor. Lauren. Yeah. I thought you were going to answer this question. Oh. All right. So we looked at factor. Factors of f and L had to add up to our OI term. So I'll do x squared. We know is x and x. Factors of 30. 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10. What else? 5 and 6. One's a plus, one's a minus because it's factors of a negative. Who's negative, the big guy or the little guy? The big guy, yeah. So x minus 6, x plus 5. Again, I like to check the nose and smile of SpongeBob just to make sure. The outside terms is negative 6x. The inside terms is 5x. Yes, that's negative x. So now I know I factored that correctly. Now I can set each quantity equal to 0, right? And then solve. We showed you a little shortcut. What's the shortcut? If I have x plus 5 equal to 0, what do you get? The opposite, negative 5. And if you have x minus 6 equal to 0, what do you get? X equals 6, the positive. So final answers are negative 5 and 6. Perfect. Any questions, y'all? We're good? All right. Last but not least, number 3. Can you do the square root method? Can't do it. Okay. Then I look to factor. Factors of f and L. Give it a shot. I got x and x. What are factors of 3 that add up to a negative 5? Factors of a positive have to be both negative, right? If they add up to a negative. And the only factors of 3 are what? 1 and 3. And if you check, that's negative 3x, negative x, that's negative 4x. And guys, there's no other way to try to factor it. That doesn't work. So if it doesn't factor, we're looking at potentially a no solution. Okay. Now, so far we've given you 2 tools in your toolbox to solve quadratics. We've done the square root method and factoring. And now this is your third method today. Okay, your third tool in your toolbox, and that is called using the quadratic formula. So that's for our goals for today. So last section before a big test. Okay, right now that test is scheduled for Friday, but it could be moved. We'll see how we do. So that's our goals for today. Solve a quadratic equation by using the quadratic formula. Okay. All right. So far we've learned at least two. We have two methods. Okay. There are more than just those two of solving quadratic equations. We can solve by factoring. We can solve using square roots. And completing the square method is something that you could dive into, but with you guys, we are not going to do this year. So I've bypassed that. I've taken a section out. Okay. The last way we can do is that quadratic formula. Now, before we do the quadratic formula, let's talk about the quadratic equation. That quadratic equation looks like this, where everything is on one side equal to 0. You're going to get ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so again, you're going to have everything equal to 0, so your stuff will be equal to 0, and then you're going to have some quadratic term, some linear term, and some constant. So you're going to have an x squared term, an x, and then some number by itself potentially. You could be missing one of these guys. Maybe you just have an x squared term and an x. Maybe you just have an x squared term and a number. It's going to look something like example 4 or 5. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to take those numbers. This guy A is a number. We're going to take this guy B and this guy C, and we're going to plug it in to this little formula. So I have x equals, we're going to take the opposite of B. We're going to do plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and we're going to divide it all by 2a. So we're going to grab the numbers that are in front of x squared, x, and the constant, and we're going to plug it into this little formula. And we're going to go through and simplify all those numbers, and we're going to get our answer. Okay? This is called the quadratic formula. Okay, so again, it's always helpful if there's a way to kind of memorize something like this. So I have a little song for you. You can help memorize it. So here we go. Are you ready for a little song? Let me make sure. My throat, I've been coaching a lot, so my throat's kind of cracking a lot. So let me get warmed up. Me, 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 me. Oh, that's pretty good, right? All right, here we go. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Yeah? Is that pretty good? Pretty good. You're amazed. I'll do it one more time, just so you, maybe you want to put this on, Chat Snap or whatever you guys do. Okay. Yeah? Put it on what? SoundCloud? Yeah, I put it on SoundCloud. All right, here we go. One more time. Me, 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 me. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All of it. All of that is over 2a. Okay. All right, so let's take a look. The first thing we always want to do when we're using the quadratic formula is get your stuff equal to 0. And we have that. We have x squared plus 10x plus 16. All that stuff is equal to 0. Okay? All right. Now, off to the side, I like to label A, B, and C. I would like to label the number in front of x squared, which is, I don't see anything. What's there? Just a 1. That's like 1x squared. 1s are invisible, right? I've got 10x, so B is 10, the number in front of x. And then C is our constant, the guy all by himself. That's 16. And then we're going to pluggy chuggy that into our formula. Okay. I like to write it out. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we're going to plug those guys in. So here we go. I've got x equals negative b. What's b? So negative 10. If it was a negative 10, make it a positive 10. If it's a positive 10, make it a negative. It's just the opposite of what you see. We have plus or minus the square root of that 10 squared again, b squared. And I'll zoom in so we can see this real good here. Minus 4 times a. What's a? 1. And c, what's c? 16. And then all over 2a. 2 times 1. Okay, now don't write very big, right? So you gotta do a few steps here. Okay. We go through and start simplifying a little bit. Okay, so as I go through, so we can see it here. I've got negative 10 plus or minus, and if you need to, use your calculator, but what's 10 squared? A hundo. Okay, and then I have negative 4 times 1 times 16. So if you need to, use your calculator. What's negative 4 times 1 times 16? I press enter, and I get negative 64. So I have minus 64. So far, so good. All over 2a. Well, 2a is 2 times 1, which is just 2. Don't go through and divide things by 2 right now. We will divide by 2 at the very end. It's one of the last things we do. Or whatever is on the bottom. Okay? All right, we continue to simplify. What is 100 minus 64? What's 100 minus 64? If you need to, use your calculator. Okay. 36. So that's 36. And no, you probably can't tell me. Oh, you can kind of tell. I'm using different colors here. And then we simplify that. What is the square root of 36, guys? 6. So that's plus or minus 6. So far, so good. Then I'm going to go ahead and right up here, I'm going to simplify this. This reads negative 10 plus 6 and minus 6 all over 2, right? So I'm going to split this up. What's negative 10 plus 6 over 2? And what is negative 10 minus 6 over 2? We got to kind of split up that plus or minus and simplify. So go to this one. What's negative 10 plus 6? Negative 10 plus 6? Use your calculator if you need to. I take negative 10 plus 6, and we should get negative 4. I'm going to divide by 2. And what's negative 4 divided by 2? What is that, negative 2? You guys okay with that? And we do this guy. I've got negative 10 minus 6. If you owe me 10 bucks and borrow 6 bucks, now you owe me 16 bucks. And now I divide by 2 and I get negative 8. And there we go. There's our answer. Okay, so final answer I get is x equals negative 2 and negative 8. Now again, this is another tool to solve this quadratic. Okay, Damien. This is one of the techniques that we are showing you. Yeah, you got to be able to use it. Yes, sir. So plug it and chug it. Now, just let's see you have, a relationship to what we're doing with the stuff before, well, couldn't I just factor this? Couldn't I just factor? What are factors of 16 that add up to 10? So factors of x squared or x and x, what are factors of 16 that add up to 10? Gail, you got? Huh? 2 and 8, so plus 2 and plus 8. Don't those multiply to give you 16 and add together give you 10? Okay. And then solutions, opposite of what you see. So if that's plus 2, the answer is negative 2, and you have x plus 8, isn't it? Negative 8. Isn't that what we got using our new little formula? Right? Now, usually when we're doing this, we like to find our answers using factoring. But this is another technique, especially when they're not pretty answers. Sometimes we get decimals for these answers, so we got to be able to find those. This is another technique. Now, the ones that we're going to give you are going to be nice, pretty answers for the most part. Okay, but every once in a while you might find one that gives you a square root. Yes? Say it again. Okay. On the notes? Yeah. Okay. We're not going to do all these either. Okay. Yes?
What's the benefit of doing this?
That's what I was saying. Sometimes, like, you can't factor it, so it doesn't. Sometimes you could have still a solution, but it's a decimal. So sometimes there's answers that are decimals, right?
Okay.
And you can't factor decimals all the time, so that would be an example of when you would use it. Yeah.
I was just asking like quadratic formula versus the way we're living for.
The fact, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes, like this one, you know, would I do quadratic formula for this normally? No. We're using an easy example to get it. But what do you do if that's a 15? And you can't find factors of 15 that add up to 10? Does that mean there's no answer? Not necessarily. It could be a decimal answer, not a nice, pretty integer. Okay. So that's kind of the idea. Okay, good question. All right, so guys, I'm going to skip over 5 for now. Let's do number 6. Okay. First things first, I need my stuff equal to 0. So I need to move this 3. How do I move this 3? Jet, what do you got to do? Subtracting it over. There we go. So this is what I got. I got x squared minus 4x. 4 minus 3 is 1, and that equals 0. So this is going to answer some of your questions like, okay, why do I need to learn that method? Can I just use quadratic formula? Well, if we take a look, I can't factor this, right? If I subtract over, I get 1, and factors of 1 are 1 and 1 that don't add up to negative 4. Does that mean there's no solution? I don't know. I've got to find out. I got to see if there's, fractions here or decimals as answers. Okay. So again, I like to list or label what A, B, and C are. Again, I've got my stuff equal to 0. And we plug them in. What's A? What's the number in front of x squared? So a reminder what I'm talking about here. A is the number in front of x squared, B is in front of x, and C is the constant. So what is it? 1. B is negative 4. Make sure you include the negative. And then C is positive 1. Everybody okay with that? Now for me, I like to write out the formula. X equals negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Well, I like to write it out. And then we punch stuff in. I've got the opposite of B. What's B? So negative 4. Okay. I usually change that immediately. 2 negatives make a positive sign. So I'm going to immediately make that a plus. Okay. Everybody okay with that? Then I have plus or minus negative 4 squared minus 4 times A. What's A? 1, and C, 1. And that's all over 2A. So we have 2 times 1. So far, so good? All right, I'm going to write here. All right, so again, that turns into a positive 4, plus or minus. Please excuse my dear and Sally, I usually do my squaring. So I take a look, I've got negative 4 squared. What's negative 4 times negative 4? 16. I should always get a 16 here. But you know what happens? You guys grab this calculator, which is okay to do, but then you do negative 4 and square it, and you write that. Why is that not right? Rylan? Right. So when you're using your calculator to square numbers, if you're using a negative, especially when you're using this calculator, use the parenthesis above the 8 and the 9. See those parentheses above 8 and 9 here? So use parenthesis, negative 4, close it, and then square it, and you'll get the correct answer. If you're really dependent on this calculator, make sure you know how to use it. Okay, or know that Rylan just said, anytime you take a negative and you square it, a negative times a negative is a positive. This guy, guys, is always positive. I'll say it again. B squared is always positive. Okay? Okay. Minus 4 times 1 times 1. Well, isn't negative 4 times 1 times 1 negative 4? Are you guys okay with that? Yep. And then I have over 2 times 1 is just 2. Are you guys okay with that? All right. Is there anything else I can simplify? The 16 minus 4 we can simplify. 16 minus 4 is what, 12? Over 2. Now, we're going to leave it right there for you guys. Technically, there's some more simplifying, but we haven't done the radical unit yet, so we're going to leave it right there. There's nothing else for me to do. The square root of 12 is a decimal, isn't it? So we're going to leave it right there. So this answers your question. You know, if I want the decimal, if I really want to know what that approximate answer is, I could take 4 plus the square root of 12 as my numerator, press enter, and I got 7 point whatever, 7.46, and now divide by 2, my answer is 3.7. Okay, well, there's no way for me to get that answer with factoring. Okay, so factoring, yeah, we can't factor. Does that mean there's not an answer? No, just means we got to do a different method. Okay, and this is another tool in the toolbox. No.
So does this mean every single number that can be squared is a positive, but you can't square any negative number and it be...
With the b squared here? Is that what you're talking about? When you're taking, anytime you square any number, it will always be positive. Because if the number is positive and you're squaring it, well, a plus times a plus is a plus. And if you take a negative and you square it, a negative times a negative.
You can't square a negative number.
You can square a negative, it will be a positive. So anytime you square anything, it always turns into a plus. Hopefully that makes sense. Last thing before we let you loose here, okay? As you're going through, here's something that could happen. What if you get 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 100 over 2? What happens with that? When we did the square root method and we got the square, if I just have the square root of negative 100, what happens? You can't do it, right? So guess what your answer is? No solution. If you ever get a square root of a negative, can't do it. Okay, here's another scenario that you could see. What if I had 4 plus or minus, what if I get 0 here over 2? What's the square root of 0? That's just 0, right? Well, what's 4 plus or minus 0? That's just 4 over 2. I would get one answer. Okay, so there's a couple things that happen if you get negative underneath your square root. That's, by the way, called the discriminant. If you ever get a discriminant, a negative underneath the square root, then that's a no solution. If you ever get 0 underneath your square root, then that's a one solution one. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you guys got about 3 or 4 minutes.